When you think about the Internet of Value, what do you have in mind? You probably think about Ripple and their vision about moving value as efficiently and seamlessly as data is moving today on the Internet. But I think one key piece is still missing, which is about trading, since we can't trade any illiquid asset against any other illiquid asset. So what if I told you about an invention that still hasn't been released yet, which would, for example, reduce failures to deliver of US treasuries and would enable the so-called Internet of Assets, which would allow for a world of liquidity where anything can be traded against anything else without the need of pre-funding, any smart contracts or even tokenization of real-world assets. A protocol that perfectly integrates into any legacy system, would be no blockchain but would rely on one, and would allow for any illiquid asset that exists to be traded against any other illiquid asset, or any asset in general, with ease and securely. Would you believe me? Hey, what's up? My name is Krippenreiter, and today we are talking about something very special. I think that's something that's pretty much flying under the radar for most. And you might have already heard the news about Ripple buying Standard Custody being the subsidiary of Polysign. And you probably are well aware of the controversies around Polysign. But what about the builders behind the scenes? For example, we have Jack McDonald, the current Polysign CEO. We have Kimon Papahajopoulos, the chief blockchain officer. And we have Arthur Bridger, the founder of Polysign and the current president. They are the founders of what is known as AtomicNet, a distributed messaging protocol for atomic settlement. As you can see, it's just a draft and version 1 never really made the cut. It was planned to be released in 2023, but it also kinda never happened. So pretty much all is left is the white paper, which I took the time to read into and simplify as much as possible. So let's dive into the details, shall we? Let's start with some basics. So let's talk about the fundamentals first. What is AtomicNet actually? Or more importantly, what is it not? It's definitely no layer 1, so it's no blockchain. And it's also no DLT. It's also no scalability solution since it's not using any smart contracts. So it's no layer 2. So it's also no decentralized app. And last but not least, it's also no tokenization solution since AtomicNet doesn't care if an asset is tokenized or not. So tokenization is also nothing to worry about. Let's talk about some goals. The goal for AtomicNet is to allow for no pre-funding, minimize credit risk, to allow for reduced trade breakage, and reduce settlement costs. And at last, all based on lightweight APIs to automate everything. Before we go over the components that make up for AtomicNet, let's talk about the solutions first. In the same spirit like Interledger Protocol, there are exactly two solutions that AtomicNet uses to solve all the problems. First, they use something called multi-party escrow. Second, they use something called irrefutable source of truth. A multi-party escrow is just a fancy term for saying that ledger managers escrow their own assets internally on their own books without any third party. An irrefutable source of truth, on the other hand, is just a blockchain. It could be a public blockchain like the XRP Ledger or any other blockchain, but currently AtomicNet uses something called ABC, which is the authoritative blockchain. Before we talk about any real-world examples, I would say we talk about the components first. They are simply 4 components The first component is the messaging protocol itself, which enables quick atomic settlement of transactions. The second one is the participant network, which defines the institutions that uses the messaging protocol. The third component is the rulebook, which defines the terms of transactions and how participants can find out if a transaction is even valid. It also may specify any units of a commodity or the expected delivery time. And the last one is the source of truth, which allows for counterparty-free services by exchanging signed documents on the ledger. Those documents need to be received, published, and distributed so that a trade may be deemed valid. You now probably ask yourself if your most beloved blockchain could be a source of truth in theory. So let's take a look. For example, the XRP Ledger could be a source of truth. In the world of Atomic Net, not every blockchain can be the source of truth. For any blockchain to be the source of truth, some characteristics must be true or else it just doesn't work. In this example, I would like to go through all the characteristics and compare them to the XRP Ledger. First, the source of truth must be trustless. In the case of the XRP Ledger, that's true, because we know that the XRP Ledger has no counterparty, so there is no credit risk. So check. Next, we need to check if the source of truth is secure. The XRP Ledger is secure because it never got hacked and there are no known inflation bugs. It also must be scalable. The XRP Ledger is very scalable either through sidechains or payment channels. The network that wants to be the source of truth must also be performant. In the case of the XRP Ledger, there is 3-second finality due to its neutral consensus. So check as well. It also must be reliable. The XRP Ledger runs for more than 10 plus years, so I would say it's pretty reliable. The source of truth must also have a public directory. Like for any public blockchain, you can query basically any transactions, any accounts, any ledger, any block, and you will always get all the informations through any explorer. The blockchain must also be able to let people manage their multi-sig key pairs, which we know for the XRP Ledger to be true because all Ripple escrow accounts are multi-sig accounts. We also must be able to create independent proofs, which only works if the XRP Ledger, or any blockchain in this case, is permissionless. The XRP Ledger is permissionless because anyone can set up a full history node and query all the data necessary, or you can simply use the public XRPL cluster. Irrefutable publication is also very important. In the case of the XRP Ledger, if the blockchain came to consensus on any transactions, then you know it's final after around 3 seconds. Timestamping is also important. Every transaction in the ledger has a dedicated timestamp. We know this because we can check on every transaction on any explorer like BitHump. The last characteristic, which is probably the most important one, is about transaction ordering. On any blockchain there is consensus. On the XRP Ledger we have the XRP Ledger Consensus Protocol, which will resolve any conflicts like double spending and determine which transaction came first. Now that we have learned all the basics, I think it's time to go through an actual example. So let's take a look at an institutional Atomic Net settlement example with Alice and Bob. And as always, Bob will get all the money, of course. As we go through the example, you will see later on that all what Atomic Net is about is to atomic settle any trade. Atomic settlement just means that a swap either happens or it doesn't. So for a swap or a settlement to happen, one needs to negotiate first, come to an agreement, and lastly settle, which usually means that the goods or products are delivered and both participants exchange what they wanted to trade. But first things first, who are all the participants in our example? We have Alice on the left-hand side and we have Bob on the right-hand side. We have a shared registry and we have a common bank. We also have something called OMS, which is the order management system, which Bob and Alice uses to communicate with their custodian, with any exchange, and to communicate with the source of truth to confirm and check anything that is written and published on the source of truth. For Alice, it would be reasonable to choose JP Morgan Chase for their custodian. For Bob's custodian, we can use BNY Mellon, for example. For the share registry, which takes care about all the stock that exists and all the assets that Alice and Bob hold, which in this case will be Linkto. And last, we have the common bank, which is the fiat ledger manager, which cares about all the fiat money and balances, in this case US dollar, that Bob and Alice hold. We will use Bank of America. As I said, Alice LLC and Bob LLC will also communicate through the order management system, which directly communicates with the exchange and the source of truth. As you can see, we have some initial balances. Like for Alice, we have $1,000 in their custodian, and Bob has some Ripple stock, 100 Ripple stock and 200 US dollars. We can also see the stock on our Linkto account. And for the common bank, Bank of America, we can see that Alice holds 10,000 US dollars and Bob holds 20,000 US dollars. So what would be the first step? The first step to come into negotiation would be to submit some orders, which is exactly what the first step is all about, which is to submit some orders. Submitting orders in this case just means that Alice LLC wants to buy Ripple stock in exchange for some fiat that she owns, while Bob wants to sell his shares in exchange for the fiat that Alice owns. They also define which exchange to use. In the second step, it's about collecting beneficiary authorizations. The custodian must confirm first that the entities involved are authorized to receive the shares or the fiat amounts. The custodian for Alice asks the share registry, and the custodian for Bob asks the common bank. The third step is about collecting escrow confirmations, which just means that all ledger managers will never need to give up control of their assets, which makes it all atomic, like it either happens or it doesn't. They only need to lock them up for the time being and sign a confirmation that all the assets in question are in escrow. So for this, they request the opposite party, meaning that Alice requests a confirmation from the common bank, the Bank of America, that manages the fiat amounts, while Bob requests a confirmation from the share registry Linkto. If all is escrowed and confirmed, then we can go on with the fourth step. The fourth step is the exchange. This is the step where all the magic happens. It's not really defined or explained much in the white paper, but it's clear that it's pretty efficient. With the exchange, it's all about sending all the information to the different exchanges that Alice and Bob defined in the original order. The exchange receives the bundled orders and tries to match the order to each other or with other order bundles that exist elsewhere. Multiple exchanges will then compete to execute the order or even parts of it. And for all the orders to be valid, the source of truth will also have to neutrally order them as well. The fifth step is then about settlement and registration, which is the most important part because in this step, Alice and Bob exchange the goods. So USD gets transferred from Alice's to Bob's custodian and Ripple stock gets transferred from Bob's to Alice's custodian. And all gets confirmed and published on the source of truth blockchain. For example, the ABC blockchain or the XRP Ledger public blockchain or any other public blockchain. The last and sixth step is the notification step, which is basically the finish line. Since all the documents and the final status got published on the source of truth blockchain, both Alice and Bob can get notified by the custodians that all their transactions are settled. Everyone in the process can then cryptographically prove on the source of truth that the transaction got settled in compliance with all the Atomic Net Protocol rules. Finally, to wrap it all up, since all is settled and all is registered and all the participants get notified, I think it would be interesting to look at all the balances and assets and take a look at the share registry, the common bank and all the custodian balances and see how it all changed. Now, after Alice and Bob traded successfully and atomically, we can check if the balance has changed. So for Alice, we can simply say that she gained some Ripple stock, 100 Ripple stock to be exact. And we can also see in the share registry that the balance changed. She now has 100 Ripple stock. Bob's balance also changed because he basically got all the money from Alice, which makes him $1,200. And his common bank balance also increased to 21,000. Alice's USD balance, on the other hand, is now 0 because she paid for all the Ripple stock. And Bob also don't own any Ripple stock anymore. So this changed to 0 as well. Alice's USD balance on the common bank also changed. It's now less than before. It's now 9,000. And Bob's Ripple stock is now 0 since he exchanged all his stock against US dollar. I know. Pretty complicated, right? But that's it. That's all there is to know about the early draft of AtomicNet, at least for now. If it ever changes, I will keep you up to date, of course. I hope you learned something new today. I wish you a lovely day, and until next time. Ciao, ciao!